So Gianmarco Giuliana, that is a member of the Facets ERC project directed by Massimo Leone. Gianmarco, graduated in Bologna, so I'm some responsibility on that. And then moved to Turin for his PhD, and now he's a postdoc. He's mainly an expert in game studies, but from a semiotic point of view that is mainly connected to interaction and experience in some way. So it's not only the analysis of games, is much more the experience and the interaction that are connected also to embodied practice. So I leave the floor to you. We have 30 minutes and then 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Claudio, for the nice presentation, and everyone for having me here. I'm very grateful and very happy. So the title of my presentation, as you can see, is Spaces from Within, Subjectivity and Usages in DGVRs, which is digitally gamified virtual realities, which includes some games and some forms of virtual reality. So since the title of this conference, of these days of talk, is the new challenges of cognitive visual semiotics, I would like to start also, like Professor Albo, we have a lot of things in common actually, with a provocation, which is the fact that a digital visage is not an image. And so this is the problem that I want to present to you, that we will see together. The first point is that image, of course, we use image in a lot of different ways, lots of metaphorical ways about what is an image. But if you look, at least from an etymological point of view, you need to have some form of representation, of not pure presence. So this is going to be my problem today. So a very important book by Professor Pinotti and Sumaini, Teoria dell'immagine here in Italian, is interesting because it would make very clear how easy it is for us to think that everything that we see is an image. So the quote is, as long as we're alive and we are psyche in a soma, our intelligible seeing comes through seeing. Our spirit sees through the eyes of the body. This means it is not possible to think without images. This is a very interesting sentence because actually the logical conclusion of the first sentence should be it is not possible to think without seeing. It should not be that it is possible to think without images. So it is implied that everything that we see is an image. So this is going to be my main focus. And why? Well, I've been Facets for 2 years. And in 2 years, I have studied any kind, let's say, almost any kind of digital representation of faces in virtual realities, in the metaverse. I have studied the problem of materiality, the realism, the efficacy of these pictures, the practices of self-expression and self-representations in digital games. And after 2 years, I was thinking that I was missing something, but it was not something new, not like a new case study, but something that I had in front of me that I couldn't see. And this thing is what I would call the visage in English, which is, from a linguistic point of view, problematic. So because the distinction, of course, comes mainly from the Italian, in which we have the volto, and the visage in the sense of viso, which is what you look at mainly, differences from all the elements on the more complex aspect of the face. In English, perhaps we would talk about figure, differently from visage, which is sometimes the contents, but I don't want to lose time on semantic question. So the face is what you see, the visage is what you look at. The visage is the face from within that allows you to see and to be seen. The visage is not a point of view, it is a visual point of action. And this is going to be, this is very interesting in the case of digital games and virtual realities. So of course there is a very interesting semantic aspect on the idea of viso, which on the one hand, as you can see, it is like the problem of seeing yourself, of being able to make a testimony of what you're seeing. It is an idea of first-person reality in some sense, right? And the second one is that it completely corresponds with the idea of making an idea of something. So to make a simple example, recognizing a face involved is a political act, saying this is a person. This is what we are witnessing with, for example, animalist movements, in which when you look at a cow, you see a face, because this is a human being, it feels, it thinks, it is unique. You cannot kill something unique, right? Recognizing a visage is a pragmatic act, saying we are chewing here. So if you ever have to avoid like a shark coming at you, you have to look at his visage. And of course, it doesn't matter if you have a mask, if you are blonde, your eyes, your mouth, the type of your nose. None of these things matter. But this is what a visage is. So this is very relevant in the study of digital games and in general, as Professor Poch was saying, of experience, because beside the concrete case studies that I looked at in these 2 years in Facets, I have always been like obsessed with the problem of truth, of experience, and of first-person experience, of course, in digital games. As you know, there is this rhetoric that video games, they are experiential, like if movies weren't experiential, or literature and so on. And so this idea of the correlation between the first-person access to reality through the visage and this idea of digital visage is extremely close. So what is a visage? So why am I interested in visage? Because I am interested in first-person effects of meaningfulness between representation and enaction. And so, as always, in 2020, when we were making like this book, Making Extended Reality, with Federico Biggio and Victoria dos Santos, I asked Claudio Paolucci if he wanted to participate. And he gave me a paper in which the answer was there. And I was like, no, I shouldn't have asked him. I could have tried, but he gave me the answer right away. So, and his answer was that in virtual realities, you have this kind of hybridation of a logic of prosthesis and the logic of the simulacra, right, which comes together. And this is the theoretical ground, but I would like to apply this on the specific case of digital visages. So these digital visages, they occur when the computational processing and mediation of the user's visions determines a sense of self-identity and self-presence in a virtual environment. This is due to a cognitive, semi-cognitive participation between the subject outside the screen and its digitalized agentive presence, such as an avatar, but not necessarily one, without the need of any narrative identification. This is not about being the character, right? This is not about being someone else. So that an empty position is created artificially and can be occupied by anyone, and anyone will feel this position as something personal. This is something, of course, very semiotics. So the difference with looking at the visage from within, so these visages, of course, have eyes, but they may also have lids, eyelids, like in the case of this game that you can also play on your smartphones before your eyes, in which you have your face is being read, and fundamentally, when you close your eyes, things are opening. For example, remember about your childhood, and so you close your eyes in reality, and pictures will change. When you open your eyes, you see pictures of childhood. And if you want to move away from something that you don't want to see, you close your eyes, and the picture will move away. So this is a faces from within. In VR, another example of the face from within is the nose. What is the purpose of a nose from within? It is to help you to have direction. Many people felt motion sickness in virtual realities, and because they had no idea, we are not used to look without a nose. It is not possible for us, right? And so this is the point of a virtual nose from within. It is to help you to understand space and to move into space. I would like to make something very clear, that faces from within, they require interaction, but they are not reducible to a generic agency on images and stories. So you have no kind of digital visages in, for example, Bandersnatch, right? You know, the Netflix movie, interactive movie. While in this game designed for faces, for example, one way to create a digital visage is to create a problem of truth, of what you have really seen. So you created this game, and all this game starts from something that you have to see that was in front of you, and then after the game asks you, do you remember this face? Or was it? Have you seen that? And you were like, oh, it was in front of me. I had seen that. You know, it's not like someone else. It's you have seen it, and you have to answer. So the meaningfulness of the visage does not rely on any chromatic, eidetic, or topologic figure. Sorry for the mistake. Its meaningfulness belongs to the cognitive habit through which we come to know the world. It is a premise more than a conclusion, a necessary guess about the subjectivity belonging to any image of a face. As such, the visage, in the sense in which I'm speaking of it, cannot be described. It is a threshold, a furnace between the subject's intangible identity and the elements presentifying it. So this view, of course, is very close to another author, which we often talk about Levinas, but we do not talk a lot about Sartre. And Sartre has exactly this more complex and more negative in some idea of the face. So scholars interested in Sartre, in Sartre's idea of the visage, describe this in a very nice way. The visage, it is the invisible visibility of the other subject through the gaze, right? And so the visage, from a semiotic point of view, I'm interested in that, not because I am an expert on Sartre, but because the visage is a device of objectification. This was the problem of Sartre. So I look at you and I'm objectifying you. I'm reducing your complexity as a subject, right? This was the problem of Sartre. Creating subjectivity from reflection. It is because I am objectifying you that I am myself a subject. So it is the visual and the cognitive mean through which the identity of the I is born differentially and topologically by looking at the he. So this is what interests me as a semiotician on this view on Sartre. So the visage is without a doubt an object of study related to meaning making through vision and cognition. But can we really study it through a theory of images? That is my problem. So the first answer is that we cannot study it without a theory of images, especially if we think of the modern way in which we think of images, of course, so that if you think of the iconic turn, for example, gaze and sensorial perception, they are central, they are extremely important, right? And of course, we do not need virtual realities to have your own gaze giving meaning to a movie or to a painting, like in Las Meninias and many kinds of movies and styles. So this is not the point. What interests me here is the fact that when we think of images, and even if we look at this description by Pinotti Somaini, we almost always think of images as something that induces us to do things, to undergo things, right? The agentive action is from the outside. So a visage is exactly the opposite. So we could say that images, they do things with, on, and from the spectator's gaze. Visages, they do things on images, and actually they make images. So the challenge of studying faces from within is not the problem of interaction with images. In Dentro Sguardo, Francesco Caisetti, for example, you completely like the idea that looking at the movie, depending on the debrayage and embrayage, you add moving. This is not the problem. And actually, when you study digital games, this kind of theory, it does not work exactly because of the agentive nature of virtual realities. And it is not also, as I have explained, the problem of the agency of images themselves. It is the problem of a pragmatic intentionality and of a mimetic indexicality on both seeing and looking at. So as an example, faces from within, they are not the problem of first-person shot or point-of-view shots, right? So this movie, which became famous for its perspective outcome area, as a spectator, like you look where you may think that the character is looking. But as a player shooting, you are not looking, you are aiming. And aiming from a cognitive perspective is completely different than looking at the same direction. Similarly, in this shot of Robocop, in which everyone looks at the subject, right? So you may feel you may feel like let's say the protagonist in the sense that you feel that someone is seeing you, but certainly you are not seeing as a person, looked at as a person or even as an avatar, because you are completely outside of the image and of the agentive power that you have on this image. So it was very interesting to see Pinotti talking about the disruption of the frame, because actually the very perception of a frame negates the subject by objectifying and constraining his or her gaze. The specificity of our visage is that I can look around and that nothing can frame, right? Like in a movie or like in a painting, my gaze. So the visage is not about seeing, it's about looking, willing, judging, and doing. It implies a causal relationship between the subject and the object. It is not the part of a medium of the image. It is part and medium of situations and environments. Digital faces, like digital interfaces, are created to act and to be used in virtual realities. So another possible way to approach these kind of issues by a theory of image is, for example, the phenomenological way of seeing things, in which you have the problem of the plane of projection, of looking through, of the subject and of the object, and so on. But there is a problem from the point of view of semiotics, of using phenomenological perspective, because still in 2021, phenomenology is claiming and defending the primacy of experience, while as a semiotician, and especially coming from a tradition such as these books from Ruggero Eugeni, Semiotics Media, our problem is like the study of construction and mediation of experience. So if you postulate the primacy, this becomes a problem. I don't want to lose time on this. This is the way in which just wanted to show you in these digital games, Near Automata, in which you are an android. A digital face is created by asking you, how do you want to scream? Like, are you seeing well? They told you you're a robot, but you're actually just setting the options. You have no characters. It's just a black screen with questions, right? And then after, when you see right, when you have adjusted your vision as the ones of the android, then you have the image of your character, you have the subjective one, and then you see your character in third person. So once again, you are not in first person, and yet this is your visage, this is your point of view, your agentive point of view on the image and on the word. So, and the last point, which is very important to me, is that digital visages, they're not about empathy. There is a lot of talking, especially about VR as the greatest empathy machines, and especially in psychology. There are a lot of important studies, like one from Herrera, which claims that there are proofs, evidences that if you do something in VR, if you don't care about poor in real life, then I put you in VR, and then you will care about poor in real life. So, of course, I have already written like many critiques about this kind of view, but I would like to stress out another thing here. No problem. This was a psychologist accusing. So the point is that if you want empathy, like a lot of theory of the modern theory of images was based on like theories like mirror neurons and so on, which was really the point of like, having empathy with something that you see. In a digital visage, you never see the visage of your character. So actually, you do not have empathy. This is extremely interesting. So I would say that digital visages, they are multimodal constructs of meaning, depending as much on narration in general term language as on vision, and are rooted in pragmatic acts of objectivation through intentional and indexical agency. Digital visages, they are semiotic machines and processes creating intersubjective forms of first-person experience through vision. So to conclude my presentation, I had two roles. So the first one was to show you, make a showcase, all the way in which, of the computational aspects of digital visages, like, for example, transparency, controlling your camera, and of course, the tracking of your movements, peripersonal fear and intimacy, the fact that your brain actually sees something coming close at you, right? Staring in this game in the bottom right, Galgan, you can stare at a girl and she will follow you with love. So you just have to stare at her. And this has an effect on the world. And of course, you have a lot of face reading technologies. But I'm not really interested in doing that. I want to explain you why I care about actually digital visages. And about the question, can you really experience a sense of self and of otherness by gazing through a digital visage? If so, how and why? So this is an important question, socially speaking, for two reasons. First of all, we are having and seeing a lot of products which are trying to have, let's say, a kind of historical impact on education by putting the viewer in the eyes, in the face of historical let's say, figures and moments. So this is, for example, I am Jesus Christ and Apollo 11 VR. And so, as I was telling you, if you want to feel sorry for Christ, if you want to understand the pain, if you want to have a sense of belief, you do not go in, I am Jesus Christ, you Father, we are. You look at the movie. You look at a suffering face. From a cognitive point of view, it is, of course, a lot better if you really want to have like this kind of, like effects. So the point of Jesus VR is not to have the player share Jesus' perspective in the complex sense of perspective, which would entail knowing and sharing his entire mindset. This is completely impossible. Instead, it is to have the player recognizing Jesus' position as his own. It is a rhetoric of perceptive appropriation of authority. And this is also important for scientific projects about health. So you have, in VR, you have, for example, simulator of autism, which claims that they want you to better understand what it is like to perceive the world as something, as someone which has this issue. And a very important and interesting case studies is the the Freud case, I don't know if you know about it, by this very famous study about from Slater from 2019. So the idea was that as a patient, you would be created as an avatar, as a realistically looking avatar, and you speak in front of in VR, in front of a virtual Freud, and you explain your problems, right? So what is wrong? Why are you sick? Why are you sad? And so on. And then after a while, the perspective shifts and you become Freud and you see yourself and you see your face and you see yourself talking to yourself and explaining your problems to yourself. And you have to give an advice to yourself. And what is amazing is that it was demonstrated that this is actually works. So there are, yeah.
Because they have this theory of mind problem, they cannot put into the point of view of the other.
Exactly, exactly. So here we have we have to distinguish two ideas of otherness. There is a strong version, which is being, feeling, and thinking like someone else. And I will deny that digital games and virtual realities have this power. Actually, I think that literature and movies and paintings have a much stronger possibility of doing that. But I think that there is a weak version, which is kind of unique of virtual reality and digital games, which is the possibility of experiencing an equivalent alteration in being, feeling, and thinking. And so right now, this is a work in progress. I don't know about how much time I have left, but
still more than 5 minutes.
More than 5 minutes, perfect. So I am extremely interested in all the digital games, which both VR, non-VR, for different media, working with blindness. There is a great interest for players to experience blindness. And this is quite interesting because how do you experience blindness in a virtual reality or in a game, which is something, of course, that you cannot do in any ways. So it is not about the fact that, as you can see from these pictures, like the reality, different colors, of course, the sounds and so on. But it is through agency. So I have tried I have to study the other games, but I've tried perception, which is, by the way, a very scary game. So it's very hard for me to study that, but I'm trying because and so in perception, you are this blind woman, in a house, of course, with ghosts and monsters, and you have to use a stick to make resonate things that you can see around you. But the point is that because of the gameplay rules, when you use the sticks, the monsters come close. So at some point, from the cognitive point of view, you cannot use your stick. You cannot use your real eyes as a player. And so you have to think, where was this thing? How should I grab this item? So you are basically adopting a completely different mindset because you are moving in the dark. You are acting in the dark with different senses, a different sense of memory, of space, and of action. And this is quite interesting because, as you can see, it is not about the image. It's about the acting on the image. And so to conclude, I am really interested in this topic of visages because, as Claudio Paolucci in his cognitive semiotics wrote, like, it is really a different way, I think, to prove that the I is really constituted by the he and not by the ego like we knew. I am saying that because, as we can see in all these cases, the idea is that subjectivity is made of multiple possibilities. So this is the fact, this is the true art of the idea of the I, right? Is that I am not only myself, I cannot only speak for myself. This is not how identity works, or subjectivity works. But still, when we think of our identity, it is really defined by how the object in front of us defines, right, the subjects that we are. And so by changing the way in which I, as a subject, perceive objects, I experience a different version of myself, a different cognitive version, and all this is done mainly through vision. So I experience possibilities. This is the real interest of semiotics from my point of view, of experiences of the virtual, that I can experience a different I. I can discover all the E inside myself that were somehow impossible for me to grasp in my normal perception of life and of the other. And so I think this is, both from a theoretical point of view as a social point of view, an extremely interesting object of study. And I thank you very much for your attention.